Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to a live broadcast on behalf of Guide London. My name is Simon Whitehouse. I am a registered London Blue Badge tourist guide, and on behalf of Guide London, which represents over 600 registered Blue Badge guides, we are bringing London to you live 3 times a week at a time when, of course, we can't have visitors coming to London. And this week, we have been focusing on royal stories and the royal family. On Monday, we celebrated the birthday of Her Majesty the Queen. She turned 94 years old on April 21st. On Wednesday, we celebrated the life of King George III and his life story at Windsor Castle. And today, we are looking at the multi-award-winning hit television drama, The Crown. And I'm going to be joined very shortly by 2 of my Blue Badge colleagues, Delianne Forget and Pierce-Goulding, and we're going to be talking about how the TV series has woken an interest, particularly in the royal family once again, and how it's impacted on our tours in London. So for those of you that have never seen an episode of The Crown, I'm going to just give you a little bit of background about the series. And what you see now is an image of the first season of The Crown. So it's a historical TV drama based on the life of Queen Elizabeth II. And the first season launched in November 2016. And it charted the story of the Queen's life from her marriage to Prince Philip in 1947, when she was still Princess Elizabeth, through to her accession to the throne in 1952, following the death of her father, King George VI. And then we see her navigate her early reign against some very challenging political times, and how her personal relationships intertwined with the political events of Britain and indeed the wider world. And the series ends in 1955 with the resignation of Winston Churchill, the Queen's first Prime Minister. And you can see him pictured here, played by John Lithgow, an American actor. This is an image of Claire Foy, who was the actress cast to play Queen Elizabeth in both the first and the second series. And that's a rather nice contrast. You can see the real Queen at the same age on the right-hand side. And we can see that that early challenge of adapting to her new situation. The second series of The Crown, which was launched in November 2017, focuses from 1956 right through till the early 1960s. So it's another sort of 8 years. And various events take place during the course of the series, including the official state visit to Britain of President Kennedy, who's pictured here on the left-hand side with his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy. And the series ends, in fact, it begins with a political crisis, the Suez Crisis, and it ends with a political scandal, which is the Profumo scandal in 1963. And then we move to the third season of The Crown, which launched in November last year, in 2019. And it was all changed because, in fact, the cast were replaced by new actors. And an Oscar-winning actress, Olivia Colman, plays the Queen in season 3 in the middle. Princess Margaret, played by Helena Bonham Carter on the right-hand side, and Josh O'Connor on the left-hand side, playing Prince Charles. And Prince Charles's story really comes into the fore. He comes of age and he embarks on his a relationship with Camilla Shand, who will become Camilla Parker Bowles. And it ends in 1977 with the Queen's Silver Jubilee celebrations, her 25 years on the throne. So that's as far as the series have aired so far. Now, a little bit about the creation of the series. The series was created by the man on the left-hand side of this photograph, and this is Peter Morgan. And Peter Morgan has had, if we might say, quite a long-standing relationship with Her Majesty the Queen, even though they've never met. On the upper part of the right-hand side, you can see a poster for the film, The Queen, which Peter Morgan wrote the screenplay for in 2006, and that starred Helen Mirren, for which she won an Oscar for her performance. And that was really focusing on the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, and the royal family's reaction and the government's reaction to that particular situation. On the bottom right-hand side, you can see an image of the stage play that Peter Morgan also wrote, which was called The Audience. And that also starred Helen Mirren, pictured here. And it focused on the relationship between the Queen and her prime ministers, in this particular photograph, Harold Wilson. And I suppose one might say that The Crown is the successor, if you will, to these two previous projects. Each series so far has been 10 episodes. The budget for each season has been in the region of £100 million, so approximately £10 million per episode. So it was a bit of a game changer in terms of television drama, because you're looking at really a feature film budget and also feature film level production values. And I would countenance that the performances, the costume design, the set design, every aspect of the series has been absolutely superb. It's really one of the best television dramas to have come out of the UK in recent years. And as a result of The Crown, it's really, I think, aroused, it's reawoken an interest in the British royal family, particularly the events of the latter half of the 20th century. And we find as guides that it has had an impact on our tours and the way we might present our tours in London. So I'm going to now hand over to my colleague Karen Pierce-Goulding, who's going to talk a little about her experiences with doing walking tours of the Crown and some of the locations, the real life locations that are involved. So over to you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, hello, I'm Karen Pierce-Goulding, and I'm a Blue Badge guide, and I've been guiding in London for about 20 years, or just under 20 years. And I have to agree with Simon that the Crown has been a gift to guides, but not just guides, visitors too. It's such a talking point for those who've really got involved in the characters of the series. But on the walk, it really doesn't matter whether you're a faithful devotee of the Crown or you're a complete newcomer, because the walk that we take goes past some of the most famous royal locations in London. And we like to tend to start at Green Park. And the reason being is that Green Park is one of Her Majesty's earliest memories. You see, when she was a little girl, her family lived just along from Green Park at the very end of Piccadilly at Hyde Park Corner at number 145. And she and her sister, her younger sister, Margaret, had their nursery on the top floor, on the rooftop of 145 Piccadilly, and they could gaze across the lawns of Green Park and just about make up the rooftops of their grandpa's house. And they called their grandpa England, but he was, of course, King George V, and his house was Buckingham Palace. It's interesting to think that when Elizabeth was gazing across at this palatial building, that little did she know that one day she would be there as the longest reigning monarch in history. Because of course, at this point, there was no idea that Elizabeth might be queen one day. She was way down the pecking order, the same sort of level as, you know, Princess Beatrix today would be. But then, of course, there was this dramatic event that took place in 1936. Her uncle, Edward VIII, abdicated. And this just rocked the royal family and led to her really being second in line to the throne. Her father had to step up as King George VI, and that made her next in line. And it's interesting that The Crown, particularly the first series, really focuses on this fickle finger of fate, this changing of the game plan, and meaning that Elizabeth would one day be queen. Now, any television series or film or dramatic production that looks at the royal family has to have the cherry on top of the cake, Buckingham Palace. But you might well know this, they're never allowed to film anything that's dramatic or that isn't real inside the palace. So although you can do the facade, you can't go inside. And this led to a lot of sort of thinking outside the box for any time that a production company takes on the challenge of recreating the palace. Also, Buckingham Palace itself is a major visitor attraction and often very crowded. And so often there's a kind of body double, if you like, for Buckingham Palace. And I think if we can look at the first slide here, we can see that body double is none other than the Royal Naval College, or the old Royal Naval College in Greenwich. And you can see why. You know, it's got all the classical features that one associates with Buckingham Palace, you know, the triangular pediments, the columns. And in the very first series, we often see, you know, a limousine pulling up with a rather grumpy Winston Churchill, played by John Lithgow. And it's usually this that we're seeing. And I think you can see that we've got the film crew all set up there. When we come to do the inside, well, they had to be thinking about the proportions, if you like, of Buckingham Palace. And here we've got a lovely view of Lancaster House, which is right at the top of the Mall. And the interior is perfect. It's all sort of chandeliered and grandiose ceilings and a wonderful red plush velvet and carpets and whatever. It's perfect. Martin Childs, the production designer, also said that he wanted to create a really authentic geography to Buckingham Palace in The Crown. And so they were meticulous about how they filmed, so that every time you turn left into the state apartments, you're in Lancaster House, but every time you turn right, you ended up in Wilton House in Wiltshire. The magic of television here. And we've got a lovely view of those wonderful sort of if you like, almost sugary cornicing and the famous paintings. I mean, there's Rubens and then Van Dyck in Wilton House, which is perfect sort of mirror, if you like, of Buckingham Palace. Also, they did use a little bit of trickery in that they have this idea of the Queen's apartments and Prince Philip's apartments being sort of down corridors and way, way ahead, and you have to go through doors and doors and doors, creating formality. Now, that is, you know, sort of dramatic license, if you like, but it works really beautifully in The Crown because it shows the sort of, if you like, the contrast between the stiff upper lip and formality of the Crown and then the real sort of private lives of Prince Philip and Elizabeth. Also focused on is the balcony at Buckingham Palace. And in fact, they decided to recreate a sort of theatre set, life-size model of the balcony, because it's such a centerpiece to royal occasions. And I think we all know that when there's a wedding or there's a jubilee celebration, we're always wanting the royal family to come out onto the balcony. And here we've got Claire Foy on her wedding day as Princess Elizabeth, just married to Prince Philip Smith, and they're kind of gazing back into the room behind the balcony. In the background, we've got computer-generated imagery. We've got a crowd suddenly appearing, and of course, the Victoria Memorial, complete with the Angel of Victory. But that's all kind of, you know, the magic of computer-generated imagery. But what's so lovely about this still is that they're looking back into the room. And of course, this catches us. Yes, we know the formal pomp and circumstance of the Crown and the royal family, but what we're really interested in what goes on behind the ruched curtains in the gilded salons, the scandal, the intrigue, the difficulty in the relationships. And so that really whets our appetite. And I think that's one of the successes of the Crown. And also, there's lots of scandal involved. So, I mean, I think Delianne might have a few sort of takes on that.
Hello, thank you very much, Karen. Following on to the secrets behind the balcony, well, my goodness, there are a lot of them. And some of them that I think Peter Morgan took a great chance in airing. Now, there were a couple of episodes that had everybody's Google fingers absolutely steaming on their laptops. And this was in season 2 of The Crown, dealing with the story of the abdication of Edward VIII. And then, of course, Prince Philip's so-called quote unquote Nazi family. Now, I'm going to take you to one of the most popular stops on my tour of my Crown tour, and that is 9 Carlton House Terrace. Now, this splendid building was built in the late 1820s by the architect John Nash, who was the architect of Buckingham Palace. And this building stands on part of the site once occupied by a splendid palace called Carlton House. built by King George IV. Now, this building was actually featured in the filming of The Crown for the scenes of the German embassy. And indeed, it really was the German embassy from 1849. It was the home of the embassy of Prussia, later on of the Weimar Republic. And yes, go ahead with that next slide. In the 1930s, the building got a revamp by none other than Albert Speer. And it was in these elegant rooms that the ambassador, Leopold von Hoss, used to hold elegant cocktail parties. And people always note there's a little gravestone next to the building of a dog called Giro. And here is von Hoss with his two little dogs. We think Giro is the little fluffy dog on the right, who unfortunately was supposedly electrocuted during one of these fabulous summer garden parties. He chewed on a cable, and you can see the little graveyard. Sometimes he's referred to as the Nazi dog. He wasn't, he was a Weimar Republic dog. Von Hoss died in the building in 1936, and he was succeeded by a man called Joachim von Ribbentrop. And we can have the slide of von Ribbentrop. He was one of Hitler's best friends. Von Hoss, as you can see, had a bit of a fabulous funeral cortege. And when I show my groups this photograph, they can't believe it, because we stand on this exact spot at the bottom of the Duke of York stairs, just below the column. You can see at the top of the picture, the garden, and members of the German embassy, and indeed members of the British public giving the fascist salute. There's von Hoss's coffin with the Nazi flag, and you can see the procession just setting off. He was escorted by the guards. You can see the guards in their bearskins. I mean, is this a shocking thing that there's German soldiers, a Nazi flag, and the guards all escorting the German ambassador down to Dover, where his body was sent back to Germany. And when it arrived there, he didn't even get any kind of a mention at all, not the kind of send-off he had in London. Well, when von Ribbentrop arrived, he had a very particular mission. Von Ribbentrop was very elegant, very charming, and as one of my girlfriends said, he looks a bit like sex on a stick. He cut a swath through the 30s-somethings, and one of them was Mrs. Ernest Simpson. While he was charming her, he was trying to inveigle her to ask the Prince of Wales to come to one of his fabulous cocktail parties in those elegant rooms, and the prince was only too happy to oblige. With Hitler's encouragement, he wanted to make firm friends with Edward VIII. And indeed, it worked spectacularly. After Edward married Wallis and became the Duke of Windsor, practically the first thing the former king did, they spent their honeymoon in Austria, and they visited Hitler at the Berghof. And here's a series of photographs. There's on the left, the Duke of Windsor with the Duchess, with Hitler. You've got Hitler bending smarmily over Wallis's hand, and the famous photograph of the Duke being received at the Berchtesgaden train station doing the Nazi salute as he was reviewing the troops. Now, one of the scandals that happened later on in the war, which you see in the episode in season 2 called Vergangenheit, when Claire Foy is bringing her uncle to Brooke because of his past associations. Now, the other series that had the finger steaming was the one called Pater Familias. And this involved Prince Philip's family. His sisters married German princes. And indeed, some of them had their feet very firmly placed under the Nazi table. Here is his sister, Princess Sophie, at the wedding of Hermann Goering. And on the left, who do you see but none other than Adolf Hitler himself. Now, one of the most poignant parts of the series, Vergangenheit, was this tragic story of Philip's favorite sister, Princess Cecily. And here in The Crown is the lovely Leonie Beresch, a German actress, talking to her beloved brother, Prince Philip. And she's telling him that she doesn't want to fly anywhere. She's terrified of flying. And if we can go to the next slide, you will see. This is a medley. Cecily married a cousin, Georg Donatus, and there he is with Cecily on their wedding day on the left. The slide below that is Prince Philip with his family. His sisters were all absolutely beautiful. And you can see Cecily completely en fête, complete with massive diamond earrings and tiara. And again, lower right, same sort of magnificent crowns. And rather hauntingly, here she is with her husband, Don, as they called him in the royal family, and her two little sons, Prince Ludwig, Prince Alexander, and their daughter, Johanna. Well, Prince Don's, here's another lovely photo of the family with their baby daughter, Joanna. Now, Cecily became pregnant. She was 8 months pregnant. And Don's brother, Prince Ludwig, was getting married in London to an American socialite. So the family flew from Darmstadt, as you see depicted in the episode Vergangenheit. And probably, we'll never know what happened. The weather was lovely when they set off. There was a tragedy. We think that Cecily started giving birth in the middle of the flight. There must have been pandemonium. The pilots tried to land, and the wing of the plane clipped a factory chimney in Ostend. And the horrible, tragic photograph, the entire family were killed. And sadly, they found the body of a baby boy, which had been delivered either just before the crash or during it. And of course, one of the scenes that had everybody absolutely astounded was the funeral in Darmstadt, which they recreated. This is the authentic picture of Philip, and Philip is the, he's the 1, 2, 3, the fourth from the left, the second from the right. He is the only one not in a Nazi uniform. And people are astounded by this happening. But the funny thing is that the royal family, Queen Victoria married Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. The family name was Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. First World War, King George V changed it to the House of Windsor. And all of the royal family today, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip are second cousins. And it was traditional that all of the family married Germans. And indeed, Prince Philip's actual name was Philip of Schleswig-Holstein, Sonderburg, Glucksburg. I mean, try and get that on a credit card. So I'm handing back over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Delianne. I love the idea of all those names on the credit card. Thank you for those fantastic insights. I just thought we'd just spend the last few minutes maybe discussing a couple of other sort of aspects of the series. Now, The Crown is an historical drama, and by definition, it is using real events, but obviously it's tweaking those events for dramatic effect, isn't it? I'm just going to, if we can bring up that slide of the royal wedding. Oh, we just had a comment actually come up saying that Don Louise saying that she loves The Crown, but it's fictionalized, so she's worried the people will think it all happened as depicted. And that's a very interesting discussion to be had, isn't it? Oh, yes. Well, here's an example, for example, and we'll chat about it. So this is a still from the wedding scene from 1947. Now, what you've got here is on the right-hand side is you've got Prince Philip's mother, who was Princess Alice of Battenberg. Now, she was Queen Victoria's great-granddaughter, so hence the sort of the link with the cousins. And actually, she's one of the most fascinating characters in the whole series, because I think hardly most people probably didn't know anything about Princess Alice, but she had become very religious. She'd become a part of the Greek Orthodox faith. And when she came to the wedding in 1947, in The Crown, she's depicted as being in the nun's habit. And it leads to a rather sly comment from the Queen Mother, as she then became, who says to Princess Margaret, "Oh, look," she says, "the Hun nun," referring, of course, to Alice von Battenberg's German connections. But actually, she hadn't taken to wearing the veil at that point. So she wouldn't have been wearing the nun's habit at the wedding. But later at the coronation in 1953, we can see, in fact, Princess Alice in the footage wearing her nun's habit. So I think that's where, you know, the fact and fiction sort of blur slightly. And I find, I don't know about Karen and Delianne or anybody else, but I think our job as guides, perhaps, when we're leading these walks, is to just, you know, set aside the fact from the fiction. What do you think, Karen? Have you had that sort of experience?
I totally agree. And there was an article in The Guardian that said, oh, you know, The Crown is good fun, but it's not good history. And I think it is important to put, you know, the drama in its place in some instances. I mean, there was a really delicious episode when JFK and Jackie Kennedy come and visit at Buckingham Palace, and they focus on the theme of protocol, and JFK seems to be doing everything wrong. He calls Her Majesty Your Grace. Jackie Kennedy doesn't curtsy and criticizes very vocally the old-fashioned and rather sort of fuddy-duddy decor in Buckingham Palace. Now, I think here we have to say that there's no way that Jackie Kennedy would ever have been so rude in public about, you know, Buckingham Palace. But of course, it makes great teledrama. And I think there is something to be said that, you know, JFK did break a few rules and protocol. He did call Her Majesty Your Grace, which is obviously wrong. And he did actually speak to her before she spoke to him, which again is breaking protocol. So I think we have to sort of allow the film. It's important to put it back a bit when necessary.
Yeah. What about you, Delianne? Have you had any sort of those experiences where you've had to tweak, you know, or explain fact versus fiction?
Well, people...
And is it a bad thing? You know, is it a bad thing? I don't know.
Well, people forget that the royal family, they're human beings. They love, they have emotions, and they don't get to lead the happy lives that we do. I mean, quite frequently, I'm in front of St. James's Palace. I'm teaching the ladies how to do the court curtsy, which thankfully you don't have to do anymore. But Her Majesty is a very witty woman. Now, my late husband, I've never had the privilege of lunching with Her Majesty, but my late husband did on 2 occasions. And he was astounded at how funny she was. And the conversation, he had this so he's going to say and that he was going to say. And they ended up talking about dogs. And to his amusement, she did feed the corgis under the table. And, you know, and she said, oh, I do this all the time. It's not very good, but, you know, I love my dogs.
Yes. I mean, I think one of the great successes of The Crown is that, you know, you've got that great contrast of all of the great big events that are taking place. You've got the splendor of the locations, you've got the pomp, you've got the circumstance. But at the heart of it, you've got these human beings who are dealing with human emotions as we all do. And I think that it's, if anything, it's made people perhaps on the whole more empathetic towards the royal family. Do you find that? Do you think? Have you gained it? Has your relationship, understanding of the royal family changed, do you think, as a result of doing your research into this? Karen, what do you think?
I think, you know, when you look at Claire Foy playing the young Queen, and I mean, her masterful portrayal, when we look at the Queen, the public facade is, you know, very sort of formal, you know, not giving anything away, quite demure. And yet this actress has managed, just by a flick of the eyes and a downward glance, give us the turmoil going on behind the scenes, you know, like the Swan. And I think that ability to give us a little idea of what lies behind all this formality was inspired and very sympathetically done.
Yes. And I think also for an actress, any actor, you know, actors are normally used to expressing emotions, aren't they? And actually, her job was to keep those emotions under wrap.
Which Olivia Colman does a wonderful job in season 3 and 4 as playing Her Majesty. I mean, she really has to, you know, keep very buttoned up. I mean, it was an interesting performance from Miss Coleman, who is completely a wonderful actress.
Yes, and it's a very interesting transition, isn't it? Because I know that there was obviously discussion in the beginning as to what do you do? Do you take the actors from season 1 and season 2, and do you age them up, either using makeup or prosthetics or a mixture of both, or do you recast? Well, they obviously chose to recast the entire show, and I think that's worked very successfully, actually, because you've got the Queen at a different stage of her life. And people, I mean, I suppose people get very used to seeing one group of actors playing the roles. So sometimes it's a hard transition, isn't it? But yeah, I think it's worked successfully. Just one last thing. Do you have a favourite character from the whole series, Delianne? Do you have a favourite character that stands out?
Well, I thought, I mean, the portrayal of Princess Margaret from both actresses, Helena Bonham Carter and, oh my goodness, my brain,
Vanessa Kirby. Yeah.
Vanessa Kirby, absolutely incredible. There is one character missing, and that's the Queen Mum. And talk about a lady with fizz. I mean, she was a very witty person. Maybe that's where Her Majesty gets her wit from. But my late husband told me that there was the Queen was attending a reception, walking up a staircase with all the guards lined up, and she had Noel Coward with her, and she could see Coward's eyes flicking along the row of guards, and the Queen Mother said to Noel Coward, "I wouldn't if I were you, Noel. They count them before they put them out."
That's fantastic. That's great. What about you, Karen? Have you got a favourite character? I know it's hard. It's a difficult question, isn't it?
It's hard, isn't it? I mean, I think you know, Princess Margaret is sort of the show stealer in a way, and I think what I liked was the sort of souring of Vanessa Kirby from this sort of fluffy daddy's girl into, you know, this kind of spiraling chaos that you know then is taken up by Helena Bonham Carter, and you know,
yes, who turns her sort of into a Norma Desmond character almost, doesn't she? This sort of like this sort of faded sort of star character. Yes. And the relationship between her and her sister, I mean, I think that's absolutely fascinating.
They were absolutely devoted to each other. And it's a pity. Yes. I think Her Majesty feels bad because, I mean, Princess Margaret's life really was the tragedy of the royal family.
Yes. Yes. Well, just before we wrap up this afternoon, we just thought we'd give everyone a little sneak preview of season 4 of The Crown. Ooh. Now, news just in, so they just completed filming of season 4 just in the middle of March, just before the pandemic hit. And they actually had to move filming forward a few days. We've got 2 new characters joining the cast. On the left-hand side, we're going to see the premiership of Margaret Thatcher, played by Gillian Anderson. And doesn't she look fantastic in this early picture? And on the right-hand side, we have Emma Corrin, who's going to be playing Diana, Princess Diana. So we don't have a release date yet for season 4, but I imagine it's going to be at some point in the autumn of this year. So in the meantime, I think we would all recommend, of course, everyone, this is a perfect opportunity during the lockdown to revisit all 3 seasons of The Crown so far, or if you haven't seen it at all, watch it. And when you do come to London, we will all be delighted to take you to these wonderful locations in London and share the stories of The Crown with you. So thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. If you want any more information about Guide London, we refer you to the Guide London website, www.guidelondon.org.uk. Next week, we're going to be broadcasting live, as we do every week, Monday, Wednesday and Friday. And on Monday, we're going to be looking at Detective London with a focus on Dame Agatha Christie's life and works. And on Wednesday, we're going to be looking at the Tower of London. So thanks to everyone this afternoon. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Delianne. Thank you to you all for tuning in, and stay safe. And we look forward to welcoming you to London very soon. Have a great weekend. Thank you. Bye, everyone.